Raids contain many exclusive items in Dragon Ball Xenoverse 2. The way you unlock those items is determined by how much accumulative damage you do to the raid boss. There are also a good handful of items, such as custom character keys, that you can unlock each time you successfully complete a raid. So how do you rack up damage quickly without interfering in the process for your fellow players? Well, that's what I'm here to help you out with. In this video, I'll be informing you of the do's and don'ts of raid battles and showing you the most effective builds and moves to get the job done quickly, as well as what moves to avoid to make the process much easier on everyone involved, as well as including some support options for those who would like to approach these raids in a different way. I'd like to begin by talking about the moves you should never bring into raid battles, and explain why they're such a problem. The first move that comes to mind, and the one I see people using the most, is Gigantic Roar. Now, Gigantic Roar does all of its damage in one hit, and is very accurate in hitting its target. And normally, that's exactly what you're looking for in a move that you want to bring into a raid. However, there are a few huge problems with this move. The biggest problem this move poses is when you make contact, the target gets put into a knockback animation that has iframes. These iframes will also become active even if the target has infinite super armor and isn't put into that knockback animation, meaning that no one else is able to get damage in during that time. The move is also inefficient due to the fact that it costs 5 bars of ki to use, and you can only maximize on its damage when you're low on HP, which is a state that is hard to maintain due to other players using healing items that affect the whole party. Next, I'd like to go over what I think is the second most used move that I think people really shouldn't. That's Divine Lasso. The problem with this move is that it basically puts the target into a grab animation where, once again, you are the only one able to get damage in, leaving your other teammates with no other option but to wait for this move to finish to start attacking again. Other ultimate attacks that have the same problem include Circle Flash, Meteor Explosion, Time Skip Molotov, and First Form Cell's Zetsume Bullet. To add some more details on Meteor Explosion and Time Skip Molotov in particular, both of these moves cost 5 bars of ki and are incredibly hard to pull off unless you're in a lobby with other players who are using the right moves, due to the fact you have to be in such close proximity to the opponent. Now that pretty much covers all of the ultimate moves you should be avoiding. Now let's talk about some super attacks. These moves are a problem primarily because they put the target into grab animations like what I've explained before. The worst super attack you can use definitely goes to Raid Blast, which can last an absurdly long time, especially if you're close enough to the ground. Next, I would say, is Gigantic Rage, which can also last an absurdly long amount of time if you're high enough in the air. Destructive Fracture also has this issue, regardless of where you happen to be on the map. Other moves that have a similar issue include Super God Fist, the first variation of Savage Strike, Death Psycho Bomb, Ultrasonic Blitz, Super God Shock Flash, the 3 Time Skip Super Skills, Android 17 Smile Charge, and Broly's Gigantic Slam. Alright, so that covers everything you need to know in order to avoid making a total ass of yourself in these raids. Now let's go over what you should be doing in order to become the most effective raid partner possible. Now, this probably goes without saying, but pure Ki Blast builds are by far the most effective builds to rack up damage as quickly as possible. And whereas you're certainly welcome to use whatever race you want, the ones that have the highest Ki Blast damage in the game are female Saiyans, Frieza race characters, and female Earthlings. The build I'm going to be talking about here is the one that I found to have the highest sustainable damage. Sustainable being the operative word. Technically, a minimum weight female Saiyan using the Super Saiyan Blue Evolution Awoken skill has the highest possible Ki Blast damage in the game. The form, however, is just not sustainable, meaning you're going to be spending more time charging up and less time attacking. Not to mention the long animation you have to sit through just to get into the form. Even regular Super Saiyan Blue requires the use of Super Souls in order for it to be maintained, and will ultimately net you less damage than the build I'm about to show you here. What you're going to want to do is play as a Frieza race character, and make sure you have it set at minimum weight. As far as stat distribution goes, you'll need 125 points in Ki Blast supers. And although 125 points in Ki is recommended, it's certainly not necessary. Otherwise, you can spend the rest of your points however you see fit. Make sure to equip a QQ Bang with the highest Ki and Ki Blast damage possible. The Super Soul you'll want to have equipped is called I've Cast Aside Everything for This, which is a Super Soul that is included in the DLC that contains God of Destruction Topo and Pycon. It boosts all of your attacks by an XXL amount. Now I'm sure you noticed the Super Soul has a few negative effects to it. You do take more damage, but I'll show you why that won't matter once I cover the skills we're going to be using. Frieza races are the fastest in the game, which balances out the speed nerf it gives. There's also an evasive I will cover once we get to the skills. Ki Restore doesn't matter since you're going to be using a charge skill to cover that anyway. And the stamina recovery is a non-factor as well, since if you're avoiding damage, you avoid using stamina. If you do not have access to the Super Soul because you don't have the DLC, a few Super Souls that work as a viable substitute regardless of what DLC you have include, you honestly thought you could beat me? And You Irritating Little Pests. Both of which are obtainable from the TP Metal Shop so long as you have an online subscription like PSN or Xbox Live. The TP Metal Shop cycles every weekend, so if you don't find them there, be sure to check back periodically. And if worse comes to worse, you can always use Before Creation Comes Ruin, which you can find in Parallel Quest 63. Now then, for the most important part, your skills. Of course, you'll need a charge skill. Use Ultimate Charge if you have it, but if you don't have the DLC that it comes in, which is the one that includes Super Saiyan God Vegeta and Super Saiyan Blue Evolution Vegeta, then just use Maximum Charge. Bending Kamehameha is going to be the skill you use primarily, as it does all of its damage in one hit and it has excellent tracking. You'll want to use Bomber DX in situations where you have good teammates that are using something along the lines of Emperor's Death Beam, or Super Spirit Bomb, or Final Explosion, all of which do an amazing job of holding the raid boss in place so long as they don't have super armor. The must-have ultimate attack here is Elegant Blaster, as it will force the boss to lock off of you. This is the move that mitigates the extra damage from your Super Soul that I mentioned before. Now your other ultimate attack that you're going to use is up to you, as long as you're not bringing in one of the ones I mentioned at the start of the video. But I like to use Super Spirit Bomb because it only costs 3 bars of Ki, and if you land it on the boss that doesn't have super armor, you'll usually have enough time to run up and get a couple of Bomber DX off, which does more damage than Bending Kamehameha, but has far less range and requires the boss to be held in one place. Obviously, you'll want Turn Golden as the Awoken skill for the 35% boost in Ki Blast damage, and Mach Dash is an excellent 2-bar evasive that'll get you out of most any situation and will help with the speed nerf from the Super Soul. Now for your last super attack slot, that really depends on the moves the raid boss has. If the raid boss has Peeler Storm, as they often do, the perfect way to deal with that is with Drain Field. It doesn't cost any Ki and it will negate all of the damage the move does while restoring your Ki like crazy. Just to let you know, you can also spam Snap Vanishes to avoid this move if you need to keep this slot open for another attack. To deal with Gigantic Ki Blast, there are 2 ways to do that. The best of which is with Photon Swipe, as it can send it back in one use of the move. However, for some reason, I'd say like 9 times out of 10, it takes me 2 uses of the move to send it flying back. Now, I don't know if this is just because there's some specific spacing, some specific positioning, or maybe it has something to do with how close the Ki Blast already is to the ground. But either way, Photon Swipe is the most effective way to deal with Gigantic Ki Blast. If you find that you absolutely require both Drain Field and Photon Swipe, then I recommend swapping out Bomber DX for one of them, as it's the much more situational move when compared to Bending Kamehameha. Now, if you don't have the DLC for Photon Swipe, you can swap out Spirit Bomb for Soul Punisher. Just be aware that it consumes 5 bars of Ki as opposed to the 1 or 2 that it will take with Photon Swipe. I'll take a moment here to talk about battle items. This is pretty easy stuff, but the 3 I recommend you always bring along are All Regen Capsules M and L, and All Energy Capsules Z. These are the best group healing items in the game. Your last slot can either go to the Sensu Essence Capsule or Regen Capsule L. If you find that you don't have any trouble keeping yourself alive, then I would recommend going with the Regen Capsule L. because then you can use that as a means to revive other people by locking onto them and pressing L1 and square to sacrifice some HP to revive your teammates instantly. If you do find yourself getting KO'd often during raids, then I would recommend bringing along the Sensu Essence Capsule instead. Now I'd like to go over some support options for the few of you out there who might be looking for a different way to go about these raids. The first build revolves around keeping a constant heal going for the party. I recommend using a Namekian, as they have high HP and have an HP regen effect when on critical HP. But this build works really well with Saiyans too. Make sure to equip the Super Soul. This will give a passive regen effect while you have a reinforcement skill and awoken skill active at the same time. The reinforcement skills I recommend using are Lovely Cyclone, since it lasts the longest, but if you don't have the DLC for it, or if you just prefer the effect, then Do or Die is a solid choice as well. For the rest of your supers, I recommend using Emperor's Sign, as it will give a special effect depending on your CAC's race. You don't benefit from the skill, but your teammates will, and you can keep the button held down to prolong its effect. If you are a Namekian, it will recover HP. If you are a Saiyan, it will boost all damage. If you are an Earthling, it will recover Ki. If you are a Frieza race, it will boost movement speed. And if you are a Majin, it will recover stamina. You will of course want to have either ultimate or maximum charge. And the last super is really up to you. You can fill it with Bending Kamehameha, Drain Field, or Photon Swipe. The two best ultimates for keeping an enemy in place are Super Spirit Bomb and Emperor's Death Beam. And if you want, you can equip both, but I would recommend choosing one and then filling the other slot with Elegant Blaster so you can still force the lock off if you need to. For most races, I recommend using Potential Unleashed as your Awoken. But if you are rocking a Saiyan, then any of their unique Awokens are fine besides Blue and Blue Evolution. You really want to use Awokens that are innately sustainable. Then, as your evasive, stick with Mach Dash, as it can help maintain the healing effect from the Super Soul. I've got one more idea for a support build that I figured I'd throw out there real quick. This build can use the Super Soul. This is as far as you go, which forces opponents to lock on to you every time you reach max ki. You can use this in conjunction with Elegant Blaster's effect to force a lock-off to keep the raid boss continuously busy switching targets, so that way no one in particular is ever taking the brunt of the damage. However, you will want to make sure that you wait just a few seconds after the Super Soul has taken effect before you go into Elegant Blaster, as sometimes if you use it too soon, the raid boss will stay locked onto you even after you've used the ultimate. If you do not have the DLC for the Super Soul, you can also achieve the same effect with the super attack called Taunt. The same rules apply, and Taunt will consume 1 bar of ki to use. And that's all that's needed for this particular build. Everything else you equip is up to you, but I recommend using any assortment of other skills I've previously talked about in this video. And the battle items for both of these support ideas are the same as I've mentioned before as well. That's pretty much everything you need to know getting through these raids. I hope this video helped you become a more effective raider. If you have any other ideas that you'd like to throw out there, feel free to leave a comment and let everybody know. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you next time.